I'm here to talk about Jim Dunlop and MXR pedals. If you haven't been over to the Jim Dunlop site in a while, I suggest you go right now because everything you could possibly need for the gigging guitar player is there. From picks to cables to pedals, their iconic line of MXR pedals, the Jim Dunlop Crybaby, the Tortex picks, need I go on? There's even a signature pick for most, if not all, of your favorite guitar players right there. Straps, strings, everything you could possibly want. I've personally used Jim Dunlop and MXR products for as long as I can remember. They've also been a partner here at the podcast since the beginning, and I'm honored that they have been with us, and I love the folks over there. I think you will too, so check out what they're doing at jimdunlop.com. I'd like to welcome our newest sponsor, Schecter Guitars. They are celebrating their 50th anniversary this year. 50 years. They have sent me the 50th anniversary of the C1. Man, this thing is just beautiful. It plays great. It was set up perfectly once I got it out of the case. There's something for everyone over there at Schecter. Find out more of what they're doing at schecterguitars.com. Hello, folks, and welcome to the Anti-Heroes Podcast with your host, Zach Blair. I am Zach Blair. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today, my guest is a guy named Cotter Phinney, and Cotter is in a band called Medium, and I got introduced to Medium much the way I get introduced to lots of bands that I love, which is from my friends, to my best friend, Robert Marchant, from a band called the Riverboat Gamblers here in Austin, Texas. And they are friends of the show, of the podcast. I interviewed the guitar players Ian McDougall and Fadi El Assad on this very podcast a few episodes back, a few seasons back. Go check that out. Anyway, Rob sent me a song of the band Medium and said, you should check this out because he knows my taste. And boy, he was correct. But they were so mysterious. I had to do a plunge, as you will hear me talk to Cotter about. I needed to figure out everything that there was to know about them. And man, I was so blown away after I started my journey with them because Cotter's just an interesting guy, man. He's got a really diverse music taste, as you will hear. He was into a bunch of obscure things that I was into, like old 70s prog rock and jazz fusion. He had taken lessons from Chris Poland. That was the first guitar player for Megadeth. So it was just a lot of these bases were covered of things that only I thought I was into. And he's doing this type of obscure punk music that was influenced by these also sort of obscure bands that we talk about. You'll hear it all. You'll hear it all. I think you'll be just as fascinated with Cotter, not Carter, Cotter, as I am, and as I was at that point as well. And you'll find out everything he's got going on. So I will shut up right now and I'll let you get into my interview with Cotter Phinney. Hey, Cotter.
What is up, man?
How you doing? Thanks for doing this. I'm sure I've done a big intro and I'll do a big outro and everything, but for anyone uninitiated, my guest today is Cotter Phinney. You have a band called Medium that I just am totally taken with, and my best friend Rob Marchant from the band the Riverboat Gamblers, he sent me, I guess, he had been listening to something that was sort of similar to your band, and then like iTunes will sort of do that thing where it plays, hey, if you like that, you might like this. And he just sent me you guys' stuff because he's like, have you heard this band? Because he knows my taste and he knew I would love it. And then I was just like fascinated and wanted to do a deep dive and try to find everything out about you that I could. And I got so obsessed. We were on tour, the Rise Against band. We're on tour, and my drummer and I were both just like finding every video we could on you guys and just like, oh my God, this is fucking amazing. And I could hear something to your guitar playing as well that was like, okay, this dude's on to something else. Like, it's not just garage punk or whatever it might be. So I wanted to meet you, and lo and behold, I figured out what your real name was. I mean, I did like a forensic study, and found you on fucking Old Man Book on Facebook of all things, and reached out to you, and fortunately you were just a lovely guy, and we hit it off, and I got to, we got to have dinner together, and me and my wife and everything. So it's now we're linked, and so yeah, I that's not exactly a question. That's more of just like a barrage a barrage of words at you. But how did Medium for you really start?
So, first of all, man, I mean, thank you so much for that intro. It's just from my end, I'll just very quickly say to have somebody at your level approach me like that and see what you see in the project and express that to me. And that just meant so much.
Awesome.
It continues to mean so much. So, thank you for saying that.
Of course.
Could you repeat the question?
How did you start Medium? Like, what was the impetus behind it all, and sort of the ethos behind it?
Good question. Wow. I guess I've never really taken the time to think about that too much myself. There's never really this like grand plan.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could say it was, but I knew for sure, like basically when I was 18, I started playing guitar.
Sure.
I didn't get started early like a lot of other people. And I just kind of got bit by this bug where I had been like a visual artist growing up. That was like really my thing in middle school and high school. That was like what everybody kind of knew me as, was kind of like this guy who draws and paints, and I really enjoyed it and I was pretty good at it. And I always listened to music and I was like really into music. I've always been into the same music that I'm into now with, Misfits and Metallica, but even like into the new wave stuff and the post-punk stuff when I was in high school. But I never like saw myself. It was always this like really interesting thing that I was like, I'm never really going to understand music, but I can appreciate it. And then when I turned 18, it just like everything just suddenly changed in that I just became obsessed with like, I need to learn how to play guitar. I need to do it. And then once I started learning how to play guitar, I was like, I need to start a band. And that was always in there. And I didn't know what it was going to look like, especially because I have all of these different, like, I just, like you, like so many other people, I have all of these different influences. I love every type of music. I love everything I just talked about, but I love like old disco. I love old funk stuff.
Yeah.
It's just like there's so much good stuff out there. So I didn't know what it was that I wanted to make, especially because it's like, it was kind of a confusing time in like the 2010s being like, you had the 70s, that was like 70s music.
Yeah.
That was a very clear Steely Dan and the Bee Gees and like whatever else. Obviously the same for the 60s. Then you go into the 80s and you have metal and you have hardcore. Then you go into the 90s and you have grunge. And like you got into the 2000s and the 2010s, and that clear kind of decade separation stopped happening a little bit.
Yeah.
Part of that too is just like I was there and I was in it, and it's harder to see it when you're in it. Like we can look back now and we can be like, oh, that's so like Beach House, or that's so like 2010s
Right.
indie rock or whatever,
Right.
Now you can see that separation a little bit more cleanly, but it's still kind of the case, like it's just kind of a free-for-all now. There's not like so much of that wave to surf. So I didn't know what type of music I wanted to make. And I just started recording stuff just like in GarageBand on my computer. And the first stuff, like I would be so embarrassed for anybody to listen to it. It was just like super basic, like the surf punk, surf rock stuff that was like kind of going on in LA at the time. Again, like mid 2010s. And then I started like, you came across those YouTube channels that were posting like the egg punk stuff, like the Coneheads and all of that type of stuff. And that was like really cool.
Yeah.
And I just so happened to be at the time also getting into recording on a 4-track cassette tape. And that was more so from the like Ariel Pink side of things, that like weirdo kind of outsider bedroom pop, I guess, sort of thing. But the idea of like blending, because I was always really into like the aggressive music, and the idea of blending that in like a lo-fi type of a way and having the permission to bring like synthesizers into that and just get like kind of weird with it, it started to make sense a little bit.
Gotcha.
So that's the stuff that like I'd always been recording and like kind of showing friends and stuff like that. But when I started recording to tape and had that sort of feeling to it, the like weirdo punk home taped outsider music feeling to it, that's when it started to be like, okay, I can like see myself in this a little bit.
Gotcha.
Something that like feels a little bit like unique to me, and I felt more comfortable sharing it.
I want to go back to the thing you said. So the term egg punk, I know it's always also been referred to as like devocore. Having the benefit of growing up in like North Texas around the Denton scene, and some of my close friends with Mark and Jeff from a band called the Marked Men, who I actually interviewed this season on the guitar on this podcast. It was that lo-fi, intentionally lo-fi sort of, let's face it, we're all just ripping off the Ramones, but maybe using substandard gear because it sounds substandard, like Dan Electro guitars and Silvertone amps or things like that, which was sort of like such a contrast to like the other things that I had been raised with was like thrash metal, which was like always a state of the art guitars and, a high output and things like that. And then sort of getting introduced to like the band you mentioned, the Coneheads, which is a real obscure band that nobody really even knows who they are. And, this like demo came out. It's obviously a 4-track. It sounds like it's in a basement. And everybody, just the mystique around that band and how just that demo and that band sort of almost created this movement of that you've now referred to as egg punk. And it's also gotten referred to as devocore. There's Devo in there. There's Dickies in there as far as I'm concerned.
Totally.
There's Buzzcocks. There's like, it's all this mashup. I think also popularized now by like bands like Snooper.
Yep.
And which also John Congleton, an old buddy of mine from Dallas, Texas, who I interview, he just did the new Snooper record. Talk a bit about that and how you sort of got introduced to that sort of scene, the sort of lo-fi, intentionally lo-fi sort of output.
Yeah, it was just YouTube, man, and it's just one of those things. It's like there's so much to bemoan about living in the internet age.
Sure.
There's so much bad about it, but there's also those little glimpses of good where the algorithm just like treats you to something, and
right.
it was one of those moments for me. I don't remember if it was the Coneheads proper or it was, I think it was that channel Auntie that like first posted them, and they've posted a ton of stuff over the years. Okay. So I just subscribed, and I eventually found that first Coneheads LP. Then you go on and you're like, what else has this guy done? You listen to the CCTV tapes. Those are all, the CCTV is probably right. Out of like that era of that stuff. That's my favorite band. Right. I mean, they were just so fucking good, and just listen to all of that stuff. And just couldn't get enough, man. It was just like totally fresh, just a breath of fresh air. But when everything like really, when it came to like my music, what changed was when the first Prison Affair
I was just about to
came out.
I was just about to reference that band, Prison Affair. Yeah.
They're so good,
it's
man.
So
They're
good.
so good.
It's
and
so
that
good.
first EP, the blue
mm-hmm.
EP with the the like illustration on the
there's
front.
There's the blue
of it.
one. There's the yellow one. There's that. Yeah.
Yeah, and they've got like a very cool like visual language building up too. But when that first one came out, I listened to it and I was like, holy shit, man. And I just listened to it and I listened to it and I listened to it. And the very next day, I recorded my, not the first single, but it was, I had released an EP with 2 songs, but I recorded the first like egg punk type thing that I ever did,
right.
which was this song called Life After Death. And you can feel the influence because I made the cover like blue in a similar way.
Yeah.
It's like an illustration. But I recorded that song and I was like, wow, I'm really happy with this. And I posted it on like a subreddit, mm-hmm. and that was it. And somehow NME, of all magazines, of all like publications, NME found it, and they like included it in their little like best of new bangers or whatever. And then they actually DM'd me. I remember I was living at my mom's house during COVID. Wow. They like DM'd me on Instagram, and I was like watching a movie with my little brother. It was like 3 a.m. in California, and they were like, hey, do you want to like do an interview? And I was like, holy shit, like how did they even find this? But just the fact that was when it was like, okay, this is like maybe something that could work.
Wow.
This sound.
That's great. Yeah, it's so funny you just said Prison Affair. For me, it almost sounds like they're a little sped up on like a variac, like the way that Paul McCartney did his vocals for Coming Up. It almost sounds like it's a little sped up, even though I know they're playing super fast. But the guitar is so, like in GarageBand when you change the BPMs after you've recorded something and it warbles everything.
Yes.
It's like that kind of.
Yes.
That's what the Prison Affair guitar, and I know he's doing it with just a guitar effect, but it also sounds like it's been sped up a little bit after he recorded it.
It almost sounds like a slot machine.
No,
like an old like Nintendo game, because it's like so.
It's almost like
super cool. It's a really cool.
It's
effect.
like 8-bit or something, and also it's so lo-fi that I've realized after the fact that he's singing mostly in Spanish as well. I just thought, the vocals are just sort of like, and I realized, oh God, he's not even singing in English.
Dude, I saw them at a show here just like 3 blocks from my apartment.
Wow.
One of the craziest shows that I've ever been to.
I bet.
People went nuts.
I bet. And and that's a band that like probably couldn't tour all the way across the states, but in New York City, where you're so fortunate to live, or Los Angeles, you're going to get like a crazy crowds at those shows. But they're, if they play anywhere else, who knows? Nobody, nobody's going to maybe come to that show.
You might be surprised. They've got like a growing fan base, and like the egg punk thing in general. I'm not like super well versed in these areas, but my impression is that like through the TikToks and through the Instagram reels and stuff like that, it's picking up steam a little bit, which is really cool.
I did notice they did like a live stream at one point, like it was supposed to be like from a prison. Like there was like a fence behind them and shit.
So sick.
It was so cool. Yeah, and it was like their whole like set,
That's so sick.
Well, yeah, and I think from liking that stuff on my end of things, Coneheads, Prison Affair, Snooper. That's my friend sent me your stuff. And I was like, you got to check out this fucking band. And what I liked about your band is that you've sort of created. There's a backstory. You guys all have characters. There's makeup, like Kiss style makeup, which each member has his own sort of. And I just being a guy that I've always sort of, for lack of a better term, played dress up, in bands that I've done. Not really so much Rise Against, but although I do wear...
Definitely with Guar.
Hackfish wore suits. I always buy into that, whether it's Ghost or Guar or, Kiss or whatever it might be. I always thought that having that extra element, that extra dimension is always so interesting. Do you know what I mean? Because we go to shows... And I don't want to see a guy that looks just like me up there. The guy like another dude does, like the dude standing next to me. I'm not interested in that. Like,
right.
Why are you wearing face makeup? You know what I mean? Like that's interesting to me. And I want to know the backstory. There's that. I think we're all sort of investigators in a weird way. Like, wait, if something's asking a question, we want to know the answer. And if there's a mythos to everything, it's like, wait, I want to get to the bottom of this. So was that a concerted effort on your part too, or did that happen organically? Or did you like, when you started the band, we're like, okay, we're gonna do this as well?
It definitely did not happen at the start of the band. We had a whole different lineup in the very, very early days, and it was all just plain clothes and no face paint or anything like that. And then with this second lineup with Rocco and Vesca, I think the face paint was something that we all sort of like wanted to do, but we were all like hesitant at the same time to do, because it is like a very fun and intriguing thing to do, but it also invites a lot of questions, both good and bad. You're just sort of like, can I allow myself to be the guy who's like wearing the face paint and stuff like that? It's
a commitment.
But it's a commitment. You don't do it for one show. Or, maybe you do. Maybe that's like the Halloween show. But we just sort of decided like, I think like we're down to do it and just kind of see where it takes us, because we all love Kiss. We all feel the same way about bands that you do, that it's like, it's fun, not just the music, but like, what does this band represent? What's the visual style? How does that make me feel? Who does that sort of give me permission to be in my own life type of thing. So yeah, I can't remember, who exactly finally piped up and was like, let's do it. But like, we were all sort of interested and all decided to do it together more or less. And yeah, it was all those influences that you said, Kiss, and also like you see like music videos of those like early 80s like new wave bands, and especially some of the like weird like Eastern European, Polish, Soviet Union bands that are doing the like really crazy like art house style stuff. That was part of it. And like kabuki theater, and just trying to take like all of that and mix it into the show in some way.
Well, it's really interesting, and it adds such a dimension, and it's also one of those things like if you went to, say, a festival of bands of your ilk, for lack of a better term, the one that's wearing the face makeup, because there's no other bands of your ilk that are wearing face makeup, that's the one you're going to remember. You're going to go away going, well, there was that band that were wearing kabuki style makeup. Another interesting thing about you that I found is, I mean, I hate to say because of your age, but you're younger than me. I was so impressed with your sort of interests and influences as a guitar player, because you and me have a shared interest and love of 70s era jazz fusion and prog rock. And I was blown away that I was talking to this dude that was from this like very fast Devo influenced lo-fi punk band, and we were talking about My Vision Orchestra and Steely Dan and Peter Gabriel era Genesis and Return to Forever. And I did not expect our conversation to go to that, because I am the dork that is like, keeping all that shit at bay when I'm talking to some dude about, Anthrax or Slayer, which we also waxed poetic on Anthrax and Slayer, but
yes, sir.
We got into that whole thing. And then find out you have this background with Chris Poland from Megadeth, who is also has a background as a jazz fusion guitar player. We'll get into all that. But where did that influence or those tastes come from?
Like the jazz fusion type stuff?
Yeah.
I can't remember when I really started getting into that. I mean, I think it definitely, once I met Chris, it really sort of took off, because then he started telling me, you got to check out this band, you got to check out that band. But yeah, man, like I said, I've always been into just like you, I've always been into like so many different genres, and there's so much to take from all of them. And I'll say this, it's a very different type of a listening experience, because like I was saying about like, I love bands and I love thinking about and seeing the visual element of bands and what are they wearing and what's their attitude and all of that type of stuff. You don't really get that as much with the jazz fusion stuff. It's more kind of like for the listening, but there is a lot of beauty in that too, and sometimes it's really fun to just like explore more that side of music. I think that a lot of people can't get down with that as much. So when I meet somebody like you who's into that kind of thing, I'm like holy shit, I have so much to talk about.
It takes you on a journey, that is for sure. Well, how did you meet Chris Poland of Megadeth? For those uninitiated, Chris Poland was Megadeth's first guitar player. I played on Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good and Peace Sells But Who's Buying, in my opinion, the sort of seminal two Megadeth records.
Totally.
So how did you sort of get involved with him?
I was living in Santa Cruz at the time, and this was like pretty early on in my guitar learning journey, like 3 or 4 years in. And was just getting back into all of the stuff that I was like just getting to the point where I could start playing like the thrash metal, because it takes a while to get to the point where you develop the ability to play that fast and that accurately.
It's rough.
So it's rough, but it's really fun. So I learned how to play the stuff from Kill 'Em All, one of my favorite albums, by the way, and learning all of like the Kurt Hammett solos, and then you get into the Megadeth stuff, and like that is like a step up. And I started trying to learn some of the stuff on Peace Sells, and I was like, this is really weird. Like, this is really different in a way that I had never appreciated until I actually started trying to play it.
Yeah.
And then I started looking at, like, if you go on YouTube, there's like videos of Dave Mustaine and Chris Poland solos that are like extracted from, it's just the stems.
Yeah.
So you can go, and I was like listening like note for note what's going on and like slowing it down. And just the more that I looked into it, the more I was like, this is really weird and interesting. And I just like felt this pull. I was like, I need to understand what's going on here. So I tried and tried and tried for like months, and I just could not figure out what he was playing. And finally, I was just like, I need to meet this guy.
Wow.
I just need to like try to meet this guy. So I drove down. I saw that he's playing. He's still playing. He has a jazz fusion trio called Ohm.
Okay.
And he's still in LA. They're still playing, the Baked Potato all the time, and other venues in the area. So I drove down from Santa Cruz, and luckily I'm from LA. My mom had a house down there, so I went and I stayed with her, and I saw him play, and I approached him after the show, and I'm like all nervous and just, trying not to like fanboy too much. And I was just like, hey, like, I'm like a really big fan. And I can't remember what I said. I'm sure I was just like tripping over my words, but I was just like, is there any way I could take guitar lessons from you? And he gave me the number of his manager, and he was like, just reach out to this guy and, figure something out. And I did, and it actually like worked out, and I took a few lessons with him. And the thing with taking lessons, or even like taking advice or whatever it is from somebody who is at that level and is such a virtuoso, trying to explain to somebody who's like just trying to figure out, they're just sort of getting started.
Right.
The disconnect is so big. Sometimes it was like, he would just be like, just do this.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, wait, what is going on?
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I'll just quickly mention is like, he has a really crazy thing with his left hand where he punched through a pane of glass when he was a kid. He had a hand injury, and now his like left index finger is permanently kind of stuck in this like pronated position, which gives him this crazy reach with his three fingers, where it's like physically impossible for anybody else to play in quite the same way. So
no shit.
He has those things working for him that like really make his style his own. But, ultimately what I gained from those lessons, in addition to just like a very sort of loose friendship with Chris himself, was I was like satisfied, because I was like, okay, that's how he's playing it.
Right.
I'm never going to be able to play that. And I shouldn't want to be able to play it in exactly the same way.
Right.
Like, ultimately, I just sort of had to learn for myself, like, that's his thing. It's really, really cool. Now, like, I need to find my version of that. Sure. Which was, it was an interesting and expensive way to learn that lesson, but I think it's a very important lesson to learn.
Well, Cotter, we smell our own, because I can't tell you how many times I have also followed that path of like, okay, I'm not figuring this out on my own. I'm going to just try to, like what I did with you. Like, I wanted to kind of pick your brain and figure out why you were making this music that was so cool. So I wanted to meet you. But there's been so many times with licks where I've reached out to the person too, like, dude, how are you doing this? Because we have the wonderful tool that is YouTube nowadays, and also the little, you go to the settings and you can slow it down. You can play back original speed and you can slow it down. And man, if we had that when I was a kid, instead of just, when I was a kid, it was like taking the needle on Master of Puppets and setting it back and slowing, and it would slow the speed down. And so, now the pitch, the pitches, we're having to go like, okay, whatever. But when it's beyond that, and it's that truly somebody like that, where you're like, what the fuck is he doing? I will just reach to the guy and go, how did you do this? Yep. Or I will do this like archival dig through, I did it the other day with a Michael Schenker Mixolydian run, and I couldn't figure it out. And I found a guy that was, Michael Schenker licks, and this was a very specific one. And it's something he kind of does a lot, and nobody else was figuring it out. They were just, here's like the thing he normally does. I was like, yeah. But then there was this one, I was like, there it is, and it took hours, but I couldn't fucking rest or stop until I figured this out. There's also, I've been doing it with Gary Moore a lot lately, and he does this one specific thing, and he does it with 2 fingers. He does it with his index finger and his middle finger. If you watch Gary Moore play, he's playing so fast, and he's not even using, and it's bananas. But there's something very specific to the way it sounds because of the way he's doing it with those 2 fingers. I had to figure that out, shit out. But that's why this is so genius, and that's why this pastime of ours, somebody asked me just yesterday, what are my hobbies? And I was like, this, like music, it's enough for me. It's my hobby, it's my passion, it's the way I make a living. I consider myself so fortunate and so lucky. And when I meet other people that sort of share that and do the same thing like you as a kid, you're just like, I don't know how to do this thing. I'm going to reach out to the fucking guy. It's like, that's a person after my heart, because I realize like, oh, we're sort of wired the same way. You know what I mean? Like they're just another human being. You could just go to them and go, how'd you fucking do it? Well, that's really interesting. And when you told me that the first time, my mind was blown. I was like, I'm glad I reached out to you. Let's get into gear just a bit, because we always have to get nerdy. I notice now you're using one of the sort of jazz masters, but it's the HH, the ones with the 2 humbuckers in it. Was that a choice by...
It's a Jaguar.
The Jaguar, I'm sorry, the Jaguar with the 2 humbuckers. Was that a concerted choice, or just something you like ended up with, or did you go, no, I want to get the Fender Jaguar, the HH Jaguar?
It really, I'll be totally honest, it literally was me. And of all things, I bought it on Amazon.
Okay.
I didn't even go to a guitar store.
Wow.
I didn't even, I wish I could say I was one of those people who I care so much about the type of pickup, and it's got to be this type of wood and everything. That's just not me. I just, it was purely just, I want to buy a cool looking guitar.
Yeah.
And then also just kind of thinking like, okay, what are the types of bands that I wanted to sound kind of like? And I was like, okay, like shoegaze, but even like maybe like a little bit of a surf element, and like the grunge thing. Kurt Cobain obviously had a Jaguar. I think it was a Jaguar.
Yeah, he did, with 2 humbuckers that he had added to it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I was just kind of like, yeah. And also part of it just being like, what's a guitar that's like, because I mean the Les Paul is like, everybody's done that.
Sure.
The Strat, everybody's done that. What's a guitar that I could like sort of like play a gig with like 3 or 4 other bands, maybe everybody else won't have it. Now, of course, 10, 15 years later, it turns out we all made the same decision. So any show that I play in Brooklyn, we all have Jaguars or Jazz Masters or whatever, but that's just kind of the way it goes. But yeah, no, it's really, it was really that simple.
So you just made that your guitar, so to speak.
Yeah, and I remember it was the money. It was the first year of college, and it was the money that my parents gave me to buy books. I was just like, well, I could just find the books online, because I was still using the guitar that I learned on, which was an Epiphone SG.
Okay.
Which it was just not a good guitar, man. The action was all fucked up, and it was, there was like a chunk missing from the body. I was like, I need a real guitar that I feel like this is like my guitar, and it feels good, and it looks good. So that's the one that I chose.
That's funny. Yeah. And I mean, and it does fit, it kind of fits everything you do. I meant to say earlier, the thing about you as a player as well that stood out to me, because I'm always listening for that stuff, is, I'm a fan of the style of music. There's little runs you do that made me realize you had, and this is sort of a non sequitur comment, but that's how my brain works. Like in the song Freedom of Choice, there's little things where I'm like, that's not just a punk or guitar player. And that's a compliment, like being a punk guitar player, that's a compliment. That's a big umbrella, it doesn't mean that you're just a bar chord guy, but I just meant like, there's guys that listen to their ilk and their influences and that player, that don't really want to get better than what they need to. They learn how to do their thing, and they stay in their lane, and that's what they do. And I could tell you were onto some different shit, you know what I mean? And that's kind of why I wanted to meet you and have you on this podcast. Okay, I needed to say that.
No, thank you, man. I appreciate that. And it's so funny that you call that song Freedom of Choice, because that's exactly what I called it when we were writing it. And then Rocco was just like, isn't that a Devo?
Oh, it
album?
is. It is.
A Devo
Yeah.
song? And I was like, oh shit, it is. So I had to take another lyric from the song, which was Total Control.
Total Control.
The first lyric in the song
I keep calling
is
it that.
Freedom of
I
Choice.
keep calling it that. You're right.
No, you know why? Because it totally is a Devo
Yeah,
song.
Total Control.
That's exactly where my head
Well,
was at.
for anyone, I'm going to play that song at the end of this podcast so everybody can hear it. And I strongly advise anyone listening to go and look at and check out the video so you get the full experience of what Medium is. You know, I always ask everybody toward the end here, what's a guitar, a piece of gear, or something that got away over the years? Like that you've lost, that you had to hawk, that got stolen, that you lament? It could be recording gear, it could be anything.
That's a really good question.
You know, that is one thing we all as musicians share. And I've had a few people on here that are like, man, I've never had anything lost or stolen or whatever. Like, what? You know, Greg Norton from Husker Du. Husker Du, you know, like touring in the SST years and the vans and the 80s stuff. He's like, man, I've got everything I ever had. I'm like, how the fuck did you keep everything? You know? It's crazy. I've had so much shit, you know, stolen or whatever.
You know, I think the reality is it's like Medium hasn't yet gone on like a big tour.
Right.
We've played shows. I think we haven't had the opportunity to lose a bunch of stuff, but I'll tell you one thing in terms of like the thing that got away. One thing that I regret not buying when I was like first really getting into, I was like, okay, I'm going to record a tape. I'm going to buy like old vintage gear and drum machines and whatever. I saw a Lynn drum for sale here in New York, 10 years ago for like $1,000. And at the time, I was like just getting started in like the working world and paying rent, and like $1,000. I was like, oh man, like,
yeah.
I don't want to be a poser. I don't want to spend $1,000 on my first drum machine, And now those things are like 10 grand.
Are they really?
And
They're that much?
yeah, man. And there's nothing like the sound of an old Lynn drum.
Yeah.
That like hard, heavy hitting, and then you can pitch it down.
Sure.
And you can get that really like 8-bit crunchy kind of sound from the samples.
Yeah.
If I had a Lynn drum, I still think about it like once a month.
Yeah.
I'm just like, man, if I had that fucking Lynn drum.
Well, that's the one that got away. What do you use for the drum samples on the stuff that you do?
When I was first starting out, I had a TR 505,
okay,
which was just like the very, very basic Roland drum machine.
Right.
That my girlfriend at the time actually got me. And now I use a TR 707.
Oh, so there's
same family,
gotcha.
Same, like very, very similar.
And you just
sound.
Go straight into a 4-track to record the drums for the Medium records.
Yeah, well, I've upgraded. The thing is funny, like when it comes to like guitars, I'm not such a gearhead, but when it comes to tape machines, I have a 4-track cassette. I have 2 8-track cassettes, and I have an 8-track half-inch reel-to-reel.
Wow.
All of these are Tascam, and now behind me, you can see in the video, I have a 16-track.
Are you cutting?
1-inch.
Are you like cutting tape?
I don't do the cutting. I'm not that masochistic.
Yeah.
But I do record everything to the tape, and then I'll bounce it. Generally, sometimes I'll mix it like on the mixer, then just export it that way. But if I want it to sound like really kind of polished, I'll export it. So I have all of the stems digitally, and then I'll try to find somebody to mix it for me.
Gotcha. Well, I really look forward to the next Medium output. I encourage anyone listening to check out Medium wherever you check out music and get your mind blown like I did. What else you got coming up? What's coming up next?
So with Medium, we have some new singles on the way,
right,
which I'm really excited about. And then just sort of tangentially related, I have a record label that I started called Psychic Reader.
Right.
We just put out our first release, which is the SAS Group record that I gave
you.
That's a reissue of a 1970s Indonesian rock band.
Amazing.
And then the next release that we have coming up after that, speaking of Chris Poland and the Megadeth stuff, just very briefly, before Chris Poland and Gar Samuelson, the drummer, joined Megadeth, they had a jazz fusion group called the New Yorkers. And none of that stuff has ever been released. There's like a bootleg live tape that you can find on YouTube, but we have real studio tracks that they recorded, never been released, never been heard outside of the band and their friends and stuff like that. So that's the next record we're going to put out. I don't have a date for it yet, but if you follow psychicreader.nyc on Instagram, you'll see. We'll post about it.
You heard it here, folks. You know, I often wonder, like, those guys were in New York. Like, how did they meet up? I know when Mustaine got kicked out of Megadeth, they left, in New York. It happened on the East Coast, but then they booked it. I never knew how they sort of all met.
Well, the New Yorkers' name is funny. They were from Dunkirk, New York, which is like this town way upstate. Sure. But they moved to L.A., so they formed in L.A., the New Yorkers. They just called themselves the New Yorkers because that was where they came from. Okay,
well, then there's the big piece of the puzzle.
Yep. And then randomly, the manager of that jazz fusion band became the manager of Mustaine's original Megadeth. So that was how
I gotcha. Okay, well, there you go. You just answered my question. Yeah. All right, Cotter. Well, dude, I won't keep it much longer. And anyone listening, check out Medium. Like I said, keep checking out Medium. Everything Cotter's doing, it's amazing stuff. And I'm happy to know you, buddy.
Thank you, man. Likewise, really appreciate you.
All right, man. I'll talk to you soon, Cotter. Thanks for doing this.
All right, bye. See you, man.
That was Cotter. Man, we made close friends. I just, after sort of talking to him, I invited him to a show. He came out to a show that we played up there in New York, and I loved it. We met their band, and they're just a bunch of great guys. What a cool band. He's just got this whole sort of universe of his own that he's doing. And yes, there's a genre and a scene that it sort of fits into, but Cotter's such an original. And that's why I wanted him on here, and I wanted to sort of know him because, like with anything, there becomes a lot of sameness in genres and punk genres, music genres. And Cotter kept referring to like the egg punk thing and Devocore. And this is a subsect of, punk rock music and lo-fi, garagey punk rock music. Just like anything else, you start pulling the thread of that and it just gets huge and varied. But Cotter's got his own thing with it. Medium have their own thing with it. It's something different. And I wanted to pick his brain. And once I started, I just realized, like, man, I heard this. I know I wasn't crazy, and you feel like, wait, something else is happening here. A lot of these bands sound the same. And Cotter looks up to a lot of those bands, but I don't think even he realizes that. But you have a unique voice, and you're doing something different and original. You might be taking influence from these bands, but what you're doing is elevating this thing so much beyond even the barriers of this genre and the tenets of these other bands that you might be influenced by. You're taking it somewhere else. That's the type of folks I like to talk to here on the Anti-Heroes podcast. Hopefully I have set that standard on here with the folks that I've already talked to, and I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to leave you with an example of Cotter's guitar playing here at the end. And I kept calling it Freedom of Choice, which is ridiculous because I know that's a Devo song. But it is called Total Control. And like I said, his guitar playing, you can tell that this guy just didn't, he's not just listening to the other bands of this scene. He's into some different stuff. You can tell that in this playing. I'm just going to let you hear it for yourself. But it's not complete. You need the whole Medium dimensions, and to do that you have to check out the video. Go to YouTube, Medium Total Control. You have to see the whole visual aspect of Medium as well. I'm going to thank the folks over at DistroKid here at the end. They are helping artists like you and me get our music on the digital streaming platforms and cutting out the middleman. I'm going to thank the folks, as always, over at Jim Dunlop and MXR Pedals. Find out what they're doing at jimdunlop.com. I'm also going to say fuck ICE. I'm going to say you got to help out trans kids and trans folks. And LGBTQ plus IA plus folks of all stripes. We also got to help out folks that are immigrating to other countries for better ways of life, and free Palestine. Thanks for tuning in. I really enjoyed that conversation. I hope you did too. We'll talk to you soon.
Freedom of choice. Freedom of self. Total control. Freedom of mind. Freedom of choice. Freedom of self. Total control. Freedom of mind. You want it all time. That's fine line. You want it all time. That's fine line. Freedom of choice. Freedom of self. Total control. I said freedom of mind.
I just want to take a second to talk about DistroKid. DistroKid helps musicians get their music on all the major streaming platforms, and the artists get to keep 100% of the royalties. I will repeat that. The artists get to keep 100% of their royalties. Can you believe that? Anti-Heroes listeners get 30% off at distrokid.com/VIP/anti-heroes. Again, that's distrokid.com/VIP/anti-heroes.